الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب دعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاظمية والحجج الردبية والجود الثقبية والنكاوة النكبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال أمير المؤمنين إلى مالك ابن الحارث الأشتر في عهده عليه حين والله مصر: فإنهم صنفان، إما أخ لك في الدين وإما نذير لك في الخلق. صدق مولانا علي بن أبي طالب. صلوا على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
For the love of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل.
For the love of Fatima al-Zahra, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل.
For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, one more salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
The line which I just recited at the beginning of this majlis is the famous line of Amir al-Mu'mineen, where he states that people are of two types. Either they are your brothers in faith or they are your equals in humanity. This line, of course, is a line which is contained within the famous letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to the companion by the name of Malik al-Ashtar. This letter, of course, being letter 53 in Nahj al-Balagha, or letter 52 according towards varying versions, is a letter through which many individuals throughout the centuries have derived inspiration. Why? Because you find from one angle, this letter has been seen as the ideal in terms of governance. But from a second angle, you find that there is a more general and universal application from the teachings of this letter. That although Amir al-Mu'mineen is addressing the ruler, he is addressing his governor, you find that there are ethical principles found within this letter that apply to every single society, every single person, and every single time period, making it a letter worthy of analysis. Now, the sad reality is that oftentimes when we have these documents of Ahlulbayt, whether it's Sahifa Sajjadiyah, whether it's the traditions of Ahlulbayt, we haven't given due right towards these traditions. As in, I remember the example of Shaheed Murtada Mutahari. He would speak about his relationship with Nahj al-Balagha as a youth, and he would give this example. He would say that imagine that as you would walk through your neighborhood, you would see an individual in your neighborhood. And every single day you would walk through and you would see this person. That although you would see him, you didn't know who this person was. You never had a conversation with him. But one day you decide to sit with this person. And when you sit with them, you recognize that you have much in common. This is a person you can connect with. This is a person you can have a relationship with. Shaheed Murtada Mutahiri says that my relationship with Nahj al-Balagha was as such, that although I would see this book upon the bookshelf of my father, I wouldn't pick up this book. It's only when I built the connection with this book, I began to realize what a valuable book this is. You find the Quran, it highlights the same thing, as in when you read Surah Al-Jum'ah, many of you will recite it upon this day. You say, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلُوا التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا. You say that the example of those people, that they had the Torah and they wouldn't read it, they would only carry it, is like the example of the donkey carrying asfar. You find asfar is the plural of sifar. Sifar is a book which contains the realities of life, the realities of religion. That this verse over here, which many of you will recite tomorrow, from the first angle, it gives a warning towards the Jews that, oh people, that although within your text it is explicitly written that the Prophet will come in Medina by the name of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. You haven't given due right towards this individual. You've neglected your works. It's as if you are a donkey who only carries them but does not read them. But at the second level, you find that it's a warning towards the Muslims. That when Allah has given you a book like the Quran, a book that contains the realities of the universe, whether at the spiritual level or the physical level or the metaphysical level, that don't just carry this book, don't just make it a part of your wedding traditions or when somebody dies or a decoration piece upon your bookshelf, but rather this is a book to enliven the hearts. And whether it is the Quran or Samit or the text of the Quran or Natik, the speaking Quran, you find each of them has a due right and a reality. And this is why upon this night, the subject of analysis, as many of you have presumed, is examining that letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar. Now many of you may say to me that what is the relevance of this letter, that in these 10 days, out of all of the topics to analyze, why is this subject worthy of analysis from the first angle? You find that the discussion of governance is a discussion which is relevant in every single society. No matter what the society is, people, they discuss that what is the appropriate form of government. They discuss that what should be the demeanor of a leader in society. They discuss what should be the relationship between the polity, between the governed and the governor. But you find from the second level, each of us are a ruler and we are leaders in our own ways. Many of us, we are leaders within the mosque. You find this letter applies to them. Many of us are leaders within the workplace. This letter applies to them. Many of us are leaders within our own households. This letter applies to them. But no, if I can make it more general, you find anyone who has social interaction can benefit from the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar. But you find from another level, within this world, you find many are discussing what is the true nature of Islam. Is Islam a religion as how it is portrayed on the media? Is Islam represented by those individuals who are carrying out terrorism, or is there a different reality towards Islam? You find from amongst those documents which show the true nature of this religion is the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, I remember Ranjiv Gandhi. Ranjiv Gandhi used to be the Prime Minister of India between 1984 and 1989. Ranjiv Gandhi would give each of his ministers the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar. That he would say to them that learn from this letter. Further than that, you find in 2002 when Kofi Annan, he writes the Arab Human Development Report which is available online. He says that I am surprised that there is anarchy in the Arab world when you have the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then further than that, he states that the letter of Ali to Malik al-Ashtar is the greatest letter in governance ever written. That this line isn't a small line. That when people have written letter after letter, when philosophers have come, and sociologists have come, and anthropologists have come, for him to write that the greatest letter in human governance is the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar, it's a lesson for us that what do we know from this letter? Can we apply this letter? And this is why tonight, when I discuss this letter, I'll discuss it within 5 steps. The first step, we'll analyze who was Malik al-Ashtar and what can we learn from Malik al-Ashtar on how to be a companion of the Imam of our time. Number 2, what are 5 lessons and tips we need to keep in our mind when we examine any sermon or letter from Nahj al-Balagha? From the 3rd level, we'll examine what advice Amir al-Mu'mineen gives to Malik on how a leader in society should be, and how does this portray and link towards divine justice. From a 4th level, we'll examine this line which I said that people are of 2 types. Either they are your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity, and why within this line Amir al-Mu'mineen differentiates into 2 groups. Why didn't he just make 1 group? And from the 5th level, we'll begin to drive different ethical lessons from this letter which we can apply in our lives. And this will be our analysis upon this night of this letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar. You find when the Imam, he writes this letter to Malik al-Ashtar, it's important for us to understand who Malik was. Why? Because everything is written in a context. And we need to understand the context of why this letter was written. You see this individual, Malik al-Ashtar, if Amir al-Mu'mineen is writing at such a level to Malik, it must mean that Malik has the capabilities to handle the realities and the ideas that the Imam is giving him. You know, we have a famous hadith of the Prophet which says, تَقَلَّمَ النَّاسِ عَلَىٰ قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. The tradition, it states that when you speak to the people at the level of their intellect. You find when the Imam, he is speaking at this level towards Malik, it goes to show that Malik must have certain capabilities to handle the teachings the Imam is giving him. You want to know who Malik was? From the 1st level, Malik was the commander of the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Within the time period of the Arabs, within that time period, the commander is that individual who would embody the spirit for whom he is commanding. That the commander is that one who would embody the spirit of his leader. That within the time of Rasulullah, who was the commander of his army? It was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why? Because Amir al-Mu'mineen embodied the spirit of the message of Rasulullah. On the day of Ashura, who was the commander of the army of Sayyid al-Shuhada? It was none other than Aba Fadl Abbas. Why? Because Abbas is the one who embodies the spirit of Sayyid al-Shuhada. In the same way, you find that the commander of the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen was Malik al-Ashtar. That you find who was this Malik. When you look in letter 38 of Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he describes who Malik was. He says that Malik, who is Malik? فَإِنَّهُ سَيْفٌ مِّن سُيُوفِ اللَّهِ. Malik is a sword from amongst the swords of Allah, whose edge never becomes dull and neither does he miss his target. When Malik tells you to attack, attack. When he tells you to stay, stay. Because neither does he move anyone forward, nor does he move anyone backward except by my command. He says, لَا يُؤَخِّرُ وَلَا يُقَدِّمُ إِلَّا عَنْ أَمْرِي. That this is the first lesson from Malik. Malik is that individual who would move by the command of the Imam of his time. That when we want to learn from Malik how to be those who are with the Imam of our time, the first lesson we derive is this reality. Malik would move by the command of the Imam of his time. I mentioned the incident upon the day of Siffin, that Malik, he had reached the last row upon the day of Siffin. He's in front of the tent of Muawiyah. Muawiyah, arguably the greatest enemy of Ali Muhammad. You find this individual Malik. He goes towards the tent. As he's about to break through the tent, a messenger comes and says, "Oh Malik, Ali is calling you back." You find at that moment, Malik has an internal struggle. In front of him, his emotions say Muawiyah is there. His mind says Muawiyah is there. But on the other side, Malik, he recognizes the command has come from the Imam of his time. You know, there will be moments in our life that we'll have choices to make. We'll stand in between two sides. We won't know which way to move. But you find those who can abide by their naturality, abide by the command of their Imam, Allah brings blessing into their lives. If you don't believe me, I'll give you the tradition of Imam al-Sadiq from Al-Kafi. The Imam in Usul al-Kafi, he states that none understands our traditions. He says none understands our traditions except three groups. The first is the prophets. The second are those closest angels, al-Malaikatul Muqarrabun. And the third is that believer whose heart has been tested. You find the believer whose heart has been tested. That individual, he gains more of the realities of the knowledge of Ahlulbayt. You find this is who Malik was. You want to know Malik? Look at the name of Malik. His name is Malik ibn al-Harith al-Nakha'i al-Ashtar. This word Nakha'i symbolizes that he is from the Nakha tribe of Yemen. You see, in Yemen, there were a number of individuals who became the confidants and the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, after all, the people of Yemen, they came to Islam by the blessings of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Rasulullah, he sends Khalid bin Walid and two other individuals. He says, call them towards Islam. 6 months pass by, nobody comes towards Islam. After that, he sends Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know how many sermons the Imam gives in Yemen? He gives 2 sermons in Yemen. He gives one in the morning time after Fajr. You find the biggest tribe of Yemen, the tribe of Hamadan, they come towards Islam. And he gives another sermon through which another large group comes towards Islam. You find from amongst those individuals was Malik al-Ashtar. And if you want to learn another lesson from Malik, we find that there are 2 things in the life of Malik. Number 1, Malik had the ability to be the commander of the army of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But alongside ability, piety needs to be there as well. You know, there were many in history, they had virtues. They had bravery, but they didn't have ilm and piety with them. You know, bravery without knowledge turns into dhulm and oppression. That you look at a man like Khalid bin Walid. But when piety and knowledge and ability come in one place, then you have individuals who are the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You know, one day it's stated that Malik is walking through the streets of Kufa. As Malik is walking through the streets of Kufa, a man throws a date seed at Malik. You know, Malik was a little bit darker complexion. They say to that man, "Oh man, do you know what you've done?" He says, "I've done nothing wrong. There was a man with a darker complexion, I threw a date seed at him." He says, "You just threw a date seed at Malik al-Ashtar." He says, "Malik al-Ashtar? Which Malik al-Ashtar?" He says, "The commander of the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib." The man, you can imagine his worry at that moment. He begins to look for Malik. Where is Malik so I can ask forgiveness? They say that Malik is in Masjid al-Kufa. He goes towards Masjid al-Kufa. At that moment, Malik was praying. He waits for Malik to finish praying. And he says to him, "Oh Malik, I didn't know it was you, forgive me." You know, he's speaking about the worldly position of Malik. If only understood the spiritual position of Malik. You find Malik, he says, "Oh man, don't worry. The reason I came to this mosque is to pray 2 units of prayer in order that Allah can forgive you. This is Malik al-Ashtar whom the Imam writes to. And it is this Malik that the Imam, he sends him towards Egypt. You know, at that time, before Malik, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was the governor of Egypt. Muawiyah, he sends Amr bin As with 6,000 troops to take over the land of Egypt. So Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, he writes to the Imam that send a strong individual to solidify this land. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives this letter, he gives it with Malik al-Ashtar. But you know, history, it records that Malik, he doesn't reach Egypt, that along the way there would be oases, there would be halting stations. Malik was poisoned at one of those halting stations. And when Malik is poisoned, you find that Muawiyah says a line which shows the status of Malik. What does Muawiyah say? Muawiyah, Tabari, he records that Muawiyah, he says, now I have cut both of the right arms of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I killed Ammar bin Yasir at Safin, and now I have killed Malik al-Ashtar. History, it says that Amir al-Mu'mineen was aggrieved by the death of Malik. He would say, Malik, who is Malik? If Malik was a rock, he would be unparalleled. And if he was a stone, no one would be able to penetrate through Malik. The women have become barren to give birth to an individual like Malik. And if you want to understand Malik in one word, he says a line which shows his status. He says, Kana li kama kuntu li Rasulillah. Listen to this line. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that Malik was to me as I was to the Prophet of God. You know, we haven't fathomed this line. Everything tells us we don't compare an infallible with the fallible. But Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Kana li kama kuntu li Rasulallah. After all, this is that Malik upon whom Amir al-Mu'mineen would rely. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives this letter to Malik al-Ashtar. Now, before I begin the analysis of the text of this letter, there are 5 points any student or scholar of Nahj al-Balagha needs to keep in mind when he examines any sermon or letter from Nahj al-Balagha. The first point to keep in mind is that when you look at Nahj al-Balagha, you find it's divided into 3 sections. The first section is the sermons of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The second section are the letters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The third section are the sayings of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, oftentimes when we open Nahj al-Balagha, we open to the first sermon. We see Amir al-Mu'mineen speaking about Tawheed. We see him saying, Alhamdulillah alladhi la yablughu midhatahu al-qa'ilun. And we read all of this. We say this book is above us. We close Nahj al-Balagha. But you find the ulama have given advice. They say there are different ways to approach this book. From the first level, you can approach this book in a thematic way. That you go topic by looking at the index within this book, and this is something which the modern mind is more accustomed to. But at the second level, instead of starting with the sermons, we start with those short sayings of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the end, that although the sayings are short, they accustom our minds to the kalam of the man who is the Imam of kalam. That they custom our minds towards the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and this is the first step. The second thing to keep in mind when we go towards Nahj al-Balagha is that we recognize the history of the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha. You find there are many individuals outside the school of Ahlulbayt. They attack the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha. They say that Sayyid al-Radi, when he compiles this book, there are no chains of narrators within this book. How do we reply to this? From the first level, when you look at the title of this book, the title is Nahj al-Balagha, the peak of eloquence. Sayyid al-Radi, when he compiled this book, he compiled a book of rhetoric. It wasn't a book of hadith. If it was a book of hadith, he would have mentioned the chains within there. But from the second level, there are many scholars who've written books called Asanidu Nahj al-Balagha, that they've searched for the chains within Nahj al-Balagha. This is the first point to keep in mind. From the second level, those who say that Sayyid al-Radi, he concocted these sermons. You find in many of the sermons, what we find is that there will be a portion of the sermon, there will be a gap and another portion. Over there, when you look at the methodology of Sayyid al-Radi's compilation, Sayyid al-Radi, he would leave spaces between the sermons and he would write minha. He wouldn't say this is the entire sermon. He would say this is from the sermon. And oftentimes before the gap, before the subject matter would be something else, afterwards the subject matter would be something else. This goes to show if a man is concocting it, you would find it would be in one flow, it would be in one rhythm. This minha is the second dalil to the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha. From the third level, you find in many of the sermons, Sayyid al-Radi would write his footnotes upon the bottom. If you compare the Arabic of Sayyid al-Radi, who was a poet in his own right, to the Arabic of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you'll find that there is no comparison between the two. But from the fourth level, you find one of the greatest historical proofs to the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha is that 250 years after the finishing of this book, nobody questioned Nahj al-Balagha. Sayyid al-Radi, he finishes working on Nahj al-Balagha in the year 400 AH. He dies in the year 406 AH. For the first 250 years, nobody questions the authenticity of this book. The first person to question the authenticity of Nahj al-Balagha was a scholar by the name of Ibn Khallakan. Ibn Khallakan, the way he does it's almost hysterical, that he says that I have heard some people say Nahj al-Balagha is not authentic. He doesn't say I heard scholars say. I didn't hear muhaddithun and narrators say. He says I heard some people who are ambiguous say this. You find that the history goes to show that this book has been highly revered. And from another level, if we have no asanid, we have nothing available which we do, you find the contents within this book is enough to show that this book comes from a man who was inspired by a divine source. And one of those letters which shows this is the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik. You know, all of this build-up, all of this context was necessary. But there are three more points before I come towards this letter that any student of Nahj al-Balagha must recognize. The first of these three is that he must recognize whose words this is. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Nahnu umara al-kalam. He says, we are the princes of speech. When you read Nahj al-Balagha, recognize that you are dealing with the speech of the one who is the prince of speech. From the second, the Imam says, فَاسْتَمِعُوا رَبَّانِيكُمْ. He says, listen towards your godly teacher, to your spiritual teacher. The second point to remember is that we are reading the speech of the man who invited us to understand his words. That these words weren't meant to be neglected. He invites us towards them. At the third level, the Imam says, لَهْجَةٌ غِبْتُمْ anha. He says these are those words are beyond your comprehension. That although you can understand them, you won't be able to reach their entire reality. That's why this analysis of the letter of the Imam to Malik is not a complete analysis. But we seek and we try to understand some portions from this letter. Now when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he speaks to Malik, he gives Malik the first letter of how a leader of society should be. How a leader of the Jamaat, how a leader of the community, how a leader of his household should be. He says, O Malik, that break your heart off from the passions, especially when they begin to increase. He says, فَإِنَّ النَّفْسَ أَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ اللَّهُ. He says, O Malik, in the introduction, he says, O Malik, that break your heart off from the passions when they increase. For none can do this except for none can be saved from the animalistic soul except for the one whom Allah has mercy upon. He says, O Malik, when you want to be a leader of society, when you want to guide others, make sure first you yourself are guided. That before you tell others what to do, make sure you are focusing upon yourself. And you find this lies from Amir al-Mu'mineen's concept of justice. Because the concept of Ali is a divine understanding of justice. Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha, he states that justice means to put every single thing in its place. To give everything its due right is justice. That's why the Imam in this letter, he says to Malik, Ansif Allah wa ansif al-nasa min nafsik. He says, give Allah His right. Do justice to Allah and do justice to the people from yourselves. Amir al-Mu'mineen is showing, oh man, that this journey, when it begins, it begins with yourself. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would give the most practical example of this during his rulership. You find this is that Ali who would say that I have divorced this world 3 times. There is no returning back towards this world. You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he becomes the Khalifa, he in his hand has a sandal which is ripped apart. Ibn Abbas, he comes into that room. The Imam says, oh Ibn Abbas, how much is this sandal worth? Ibn Abbas, he looks at the sandal, he sees a patch here, he sees it's ripped all over. Ibn Abbas says it's worth nothing. The Imam replies by saying it's worth more to me than this entire khilafat. He says it's worth more to me than this entire khilafat, except for I can establish right with this khilafat and I can prevent that which is wrong. Amir al-Mu'mineen shows that he didn't have any self-interest. His interest was in the community. That when you are the leader of a jamaat, when you are the leader of the community, your goal is not your self-interest, your goal is not your self-praise. Your goal is the interest of the community and the pleasure of Allah. After that, the Imam, he continues speaking to Malik. He says, oh Malik, when you sit, make sure you make time for the poor of society. Make sure you sit in front of them with humility. That when you're a leader in society, oh Malik, make sure you are humble when you are in front of your people. Then he says, oh Malik, when you appoint governors with you, make sure you don't appoint governors who are part of an evil regime before you. For you can find people like them in belief and views who don't share with them in vices and sins. He says, oh Malik, when you're putting people around you, don't just put your friends, put those individuals who have values, put those individuals who have ability. You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he becomes the Khalifa, you find he de-appoints all of the governors from the previous administrations. Ibn Abbas, he comes towards the Imam. He says to the Imam that, oh Ali, if you keep all of those governors from the previous administrations, it will help you in keeping peace and not dividing the Muslim Ummah. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he replies by saying that I have a responsibility towards the truth. That the Imam goes to show that maybe at a worldly level it might be beneficial towards me, but I am a man of principles, I am a man of value, I am a man of the truth. You know, I remember when Amir al-Mu'mineen, that day it comes, they go to the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen to ask him to take the position of Khilafat. You know how Amir al-Mu'mineen comes out, the traditions say, they say on his hand was the ring of Sulaiman. In his hand was the asa of Musa. Wearing the shirt of Ibrahim, he walks towards the mimbar of Rasulullah. Now those before Amir al-Mu'mineen, they wouldn't sit on the same spot that Rasulullah would sit. One would sit below that, another below that, another below that. They thought that Ali is going upon the mimbar, Ali is going to sit one step lower as well. But no, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he walks towards the mimbar. He places his foot where the third would sit. Then he places his foot where the second would sit, where the first would sit. and he would sit where Rasulullah would sit. And it's at that moment you would find that Amir al-Mu'mineen would say that truth has returned towards its position. You find the ashab of Rasulullah upon that day. They would say it is the first time since the death of Rasulullah that we are reminded of the time of Rasulullah. And that only occurs through the governance of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But you find line after line is there in this letter. But there is one line that if a person wants to understand the principles of how to live within this world, he should understand this one line. The Imam, he says to Malik, O Malik, فَإِنَّهُمْ صِنْفَانِ إِمَّا أَخٌ لَكَ فِي الدِّينِ وَإِمَّا نَذِيرٌ لَكَ فِي الْخَلْقِ. He says, O Malik, know that people are of two types. Either they are your brothers in faith or they are your equals in humanity. You know, the question arises, is that why does Amir al-Mu'mineen differentiate between the two groups? Why is everyone not one brotherhood? Why are there two groups? You know, this echoes the sentiments of the Quran. The Quran, it says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. It says the believers are a brotherhood. You know, in Islam, we do not form brotherhood out of formality. Our brotherhoods are formed with a purpose, and that purpose and goal is Allah. You know, you look at the martyrs on the day of Ashura, you find although they were 72 in number, you find they revolved around one axis. That axis was Hussein ibn Ali. That although their numbers were multiple, you find that there was one spirit which they revolved around. Allah, He goes to show that when you form your communities, that before you make sure the mosque is decorated and you spent on the mosque, make sure the hearts of the believers as well are united. That focus upon those who come within the mosque as well. That's why when Rasulullah, he migrates from Makkah to Medina, the first thing Rasulullah does is he establishes brotherhood between those who migrated and the Ansar. You find that people would be made brother of one another. But you find as Rasulullah would go down the rows, Amir al-Mu'mineen would be seen crying. Rasulullah would say, Oh Ali, why do you cry? You find Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, Oh Rasulullah, you made everyone the brother of somebody, but you didn't make a brother for me. Rasulullah says a line which shows the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Oh Ali, if any of them were like you, I would have made them your brother. Then he says, Ya Ali, anta akhi fi dunya wal akhirah. That, oh Ali, you are my brother within this world and the hereafter. You see, the bond of brotherhood is the strongest bond between two people. You know, you might you know, you may ask me the question that how can you say the bond of brotherhood is the strongest bond? Isn't the bond between a parent and their child stronger? I say no, that is a different type of bond because one group has to obey the other group. That they're at different levels, but when it comes to brotherhood, you find they're at the same level. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he highlights this. But then after that, he gives line after line. And the time is against me, but as many of the lines from this sermon as I remember, I'll mention towards them as much as time allows. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he begins to speak to Malik. He says, Oh Malik, know that the people will watch your dealings in the way you used to watch the dealings of those before you. That, oh Malik, before you there were governments. Both of them were just and they were unjust as well. Then he says, oh Malik, know that the people may have slip-ups. The people may make mistakes. But, O Malik, forgive them in the way that you would want Allah to forgive you. Then he says, O Malik, know that you stand over the people, and your Imam stands over you, and Allah's command stands over your Imam. You know, Malik is showing a lesson that oftentimes we in our lives, we say, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, but a moment a member of our community asks for forgiveness, we say, no, leave. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Oh Malik, that if you want Allah to forgive you, then forgive the creation of Allah. Then after that, he says, O Malik, it is upon the leader to cover the faults of his subjects. For if he covers the faults of his subjects, then Allah will cover his faults. I remember that they asked Marhum Ayatullah al-Khui that when somebody passes away and you walk around the body of that individual, you say this line, Allahumma inna la na'lamu minhu illa khair. And if it's a female, you say minha, the feminine version. They said to Ayatullah Khui that within this line you are saying that we do not know anything from this person except for good. What if you knew the person? What if you saw him as a sinner? Aren't you technically lying when you say this line? Ayatullah Khui replied by saying that this khair you testify to is not the deeds of the individual. It's to the fact that person had the wilayah of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad in their hearts. The moment they have the wilayah of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, you've given up the right to look into the faults of that individual. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, O Malik, cover the faults of your subjects in the way you would want Allah to cover your faults. Then after that, he says, O Malik, don't stand over your subjects and habituate your heart to mercy, O Malik. Don't stand over your subjects like greedy beasts, for they are of two types. Either they are your brothers in faith, or they are your equals in humanity, O Malik. He says, O Malik, that have mercy towards your subjects. After that, he says another line. He says, O Malik, know that the praise of the virtuous is spread by Allah upon the tongues of the creation. He goes to show, O Malik, that you don't have to tell other individuals what good you've done in your life. Allah will spread your praise upon the tongues of the creation. And line after line, that Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to show that what vision he has of society. Another line, he says, O Malik, when you lead prayer, lead it in the way in which the weakest can handle it. For when Rasulullah sent me towards Yemen, he said to me, O Ali, lead prayer in that manner. And there's many different aspects of this sermon. This sermon is worthy of entire 10 nights of lectures. But I know many of you upon these nights, you come to listen to the virtues of Ahlulbayt. There's one incident which takes place upon the day of Siffin. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes out upon the day of Siffin. When Ali ibn Abi Talib comes out, you find that there are 4 young men surrounding Ali ibn Abi Talib. One was to his right, one was to his left, one was behind him, one was in front of him holding the alam, holding the flag. The narrator, he says that I asked the individual that who are these people surrounding Ali ibn Abi Talib? He says, ask for those 2 on his right and his left from whose face light is emanating. Those are his sons Hassan and Hussein. Then I said to him, who is that young man behind Ali ibn Abi Talib? He says, that is his son Muhammad al-Hanafiya. He says, what about the one in the front holding that flag who has Jalal upon his face? He says, that is none other than his son Abbas. Then he says, who is that old man who is walking behind them? His back is bent, his eyebrows are sagging. They say that is none other than Malik al-Ashtar. It was the day of Siffin. Amir al-Mu'mineen would attack someone, Malik would attack someone. They would go side by side. After fighting, a discussion occurs between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Malik. Malik, he smiles. He says, oh my master, we've killed the same number of people. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Malik, how do you know that? Malik, he says, every time you kill someone, you say Allahu Akbar. And by my count, you've killed 70 individuals. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Malik, that may be true. But Malik, remember one thing. There is a difference between whom you kill and whom I kill. You kill anyone who is in front of you. But when I kill someone, I look 7 generations or 70 generations, according to another version, down their lineage, And if there's someone who is able to be guided in that lineage, I don't kill that individual. This is the relationship of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Malik al-Ashtar. That Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would look after his companions. But you find this Ali ibn Abi Talib, if he felt this pain upon the demise of Malik, what did this Imam feel knowing what his daughter Zainab would have to go through after Karbala? You know, it's stated when the Imam, he moves his caliphate from Medina towards Kufa, the Imam, he would bring his daughters upon the camels. The camels would have a curtain, they would be covered. You find as the Imam goes through Kufa, he stops and he opens that curtain upon the camel. He says, "Oh Zainab, look at this. This is the door of Kufa." You find they go farther. The Imam, he opens the curtain. He says, "Oh Zainab, no, look, these are the alleyways of Kufa." The Imam, they go further. He says, "Oh Zainab, this is the courtyard of Kufa." Then after that, he says one more time when he stops it, he says, "Oh Zainab, this is the bazaar, this is the marketplace of Kufa." It's at that point, Sayyida Zainab, she says, "Oh my father, if you told this to Abbas, I would understand. If you told this to Muhammad al-Hanafiya, I would understand. But oh my father, this marketplace, this courtyard, the door of Kufa, I'm supposed to stay within the home. Why are you telling me this?" Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Oh Zainab, a time will come in this Kufa. You'll enter this Kufa, oh Zainab, when the eyes of the non-mahram are upon you, oh Zainab." You find it is the Sayyida Zainab, that if you want to understand the musibah of Lady Zainab, this one title is enough, that Zainab is Ummul Masa'ib, that Zainab is the mother of musibah. You know, Ayatollah Buzurg Shirazi, that after the time of Fajr, Mirzai Buzurg, within his house a majlis would take place. It stated that within that majlis, the khatib upon the mimbar, he said one line. He said, "Dakhalat Zainab ala ibn Ziyad." He said that Zainab entered the court of Ibn Ziyad. It stated that Mirza Buzurg says, "Oh man, stop the musibah. I can't handle anymore. The thought of Zainab in the court of a drunkard is enough for one to stop and cry at this moment." That on this night, we remember the children of Sayyida Zainab. You know, it stated when Sayyida Zainab, she married Hazrat Abdullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he put two conditions upon the marriage. He said, "Oh Abdullah, you can marry Zainab, but the first condition is make sure that you allow Zainab to visit her brother twice every day." Then he says, "Oh Abdullah, the second condition is this, is that a day will come where my son Hussein goes towards Karbala. Upon that day, make sure you give my daughter permission to go with her brother." You know, it stated when this caravan it leaves Medina towards Makkah, On and Muhammad, they didn't go with Sayyida Zainab. They stayed with Hazrat Abdullah. But it's when they came to the halting station of Tan'im that Hazrat Abdullah, he comes with On and Muhammad. When they come towards that caravan, you find Imam al-Hussein, he says, "Oh Abbas, set a tent for Zainab so she can speak towards Abdullah." You find Sayyida Zainab, she says, "Oh Abdullah, have you come to tell me not to go towards Karbala with my brother?" You find Abdullah, he says, "No, this isn't the case." But he says, "Oh granddaughter of Rasulullah, there is a hadith of your grandfather. Your grandfather, he says that whenever anyone goes on a journey, you should give sadaqah, you should give something in the way of Allah. I've brought our son Muhammad on my behalf to give in the way of Allah, and I brought on your behalf." You find this caravan, it was the night before Ashura. Each of the women would speak towards their children. Rabab would speak towards Ali Asghar. You find Kulthum would speak towards Abbas. History records on that night, Sayyida Zainab, she would speak towards On and Muhammad. She says, "Oh On and Muhammad, I know that you are the grandchildren of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I know that you are the grandchildren of Ja'far al-Tayyar. I know a time will come when you reach the Furat. But when you reach the Furat, remember the will of your mother, that don't drink from the water of the Furat unless Ali Asghar and Sakina have drank from the Furat." You know, the day of Ashura has come. I know you can't handle anymore. The day of Ashura, it came. You find these children would look towards their uncle. Sayyid al-Shuhada wouldn't give any permission. They would go back towards their mother. Their mother would say, "Oh On and Muhammad, you haven't sacrificed yourself for your uncle." They would say, "Our uncle doesn't give permission." You find Sayyida Zainab, she goes towards Sayyida Shuhada. When she asked Sayyida Shuhada, the Imam, he couldn't refuse Zainab. You find these children, On and Muhammad, they go towards the Maqtal. They fight and they fight, but how long would they fight for? 3 days, no food, no water. It's at a point it comes that they fall towards the ground. They say, "Oh, our uncle." The narrations say that one side Imam al-Hussein came, from the other side Hazrat Abbas comes. They pick up the bodies of On and Muhammad. They take those bodies towards Sayyida Zainab. Sayyida Zainab, imagine a mother standing over the dead bodies of her children. You know what Zainab she does? She places one hand on the body of On. She places one hand on the body of Muhammad. She places her head in sajda. She says, "Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas." You know, Sayyida Zainab, that a mother over the dead body of her children, she does this. Understand the maqam of Zainab. But you know, on that day of Ashura, Zainab, she didn't cry for her children, On and Muhammad. They went through Kufa. She didn't cry for On and Muhammad. Even to the extent that when they were in Sham and Yazid, he returned the heads. Each of the women, they would take the heads of their beloved. That Layla would take the head of Ali Akbar. Kulthum would take the head of Abbas. But there were 2 heads that none of the women, they claimed those heads. It was at that point that the women of Sham, they say, "Oh Fidda, that whose mother is these? That has their mother passed away?" Fidda says, "Oh women, don't say this line in front of Zainab." Lady Fidda, she goes towards Sayyida Zainab. She says, "Oh lady," she says, "why don't you take the heads of your children?" Sayyida Zainab says, "Oh Fidda, I am from Ahlulbayt, oh Fidda. When we give something in the way of Allah, we don't take it back. I've left all the musibah." You know, when this caravan, it returns towards Medina, Sayyida Zainab, she goes towards the grave of Rasulullah. The narration states that she says, "Oh my grandfather, if there weren't non-mahram watching, I would show you those marks upon my arms." After that, she goes to the grave of her mother Fatima Zahra. She says, "Oh my mother, it's the way of the Arabs that when they go on a journey, they bring something back. Oh my mother, I brought the shirt of Hussein." She places the shirt of Hussein on the grave of Fatima Zahra. One more line of musibah. You know, the time it comes, Sayyidah Zainab, she returns towards her home. When she returns towards her home, when Hazrat Abdullah, he sees her, he says, oh Da'ifa, oh woman who's become weak, Zainab isn't within the house. Why are you entering my home? You find Zainab. She says, oh Abdullah, do you not recognize Zainab? You find that Sayyidah Zainab, she goes to that room where On and Muhammad would sleep. When she sees the prayer mats of On and Muhammad, it's at this point that a mother, she begins to cry for her children. She says, oh On and Muhammad, forgive your mother Zainab. She had promised her mother Fatima that if she would cry, it would be Matam Hussein.